Hi,
What?
Steph. Hi, everybody. We are live today in our Facebook community. And our topic for today is from one of our community members. So if you want to become one of our community members, you may also be able to submit ideas for episodes. We have tweaked it a little bit, though, haven't we, Steph? Do you want to share what the original idea was? And it was from Natalie. So thanks, Natalie, for this suggestion. It's a good one.
Yeah. It was about celebrating and honoring the wins along the way in recovery. And the context for that, and I'm just going to read it. I think back to when I first started working on recovery in 2020, and I don't recall celebrating anything. There were all sorts of wins, minor and major, but I didn't give those recognition and only focused on all the things I still had to learn and what was not going well. It took me over 3.5 years to look back and see that while I was still struggling, I had made significant shifts along the way. And now, as I get closer and closer to a recovered state, I start thinking about how I will celebrate that if I don't know how to celebrate where I am right now or where I came from. In diet culture, there's all sorts of celebration and praise showered along the way on a person for a job well done. But what about celebrating the wins in recovery?
Because, yeah, when you're dieting, you've got the numbers to go by. So there's a congratulatory feeling if you are eating below certain numbers, if your weight is going below certain numbers. And a lot of diet clubs reward certain milestones. So I know you guys don't work in stones. We work in stones in the UK. Well, the diet clubs will, if you lose certain stones, you get a
Yeah.
certificate for having lost 1 stone, 2 stone.
Yeah, we have the same. It's like it's just in pounds. You get your markers for different pounds. Yeah, so there's a lot of emphasis on it's that concreteness because I think the difference between diet wins and recovery wins is the abstract, right? Like it's numbers are numbers. Like you reach this number on the scale or this size in your clothing and you win. Like it's very black and white. Versus in recovery, it's like, it's not. You don't get, there's nothing like that. A lot of it's subjective, which I think we should talk about like what even subjectively feels like the wins. And it's also variable in terms of like one day you could be like, I got this. Like I did the thing. I had the food in my house and I didn't feel like I needed to binge on it, or I binged, but I didn't purge, or whatever it is. But the next day it might look totally different. And so it's like, well, then was that ever a success in the first place? Like, how does this get measured? It also makes it difficult that it's not even recognized by anyone else. So there's nobody congratulating you for these things. We're not talking about these. No one's going to a party and being like, I didn't purge before I got here. Like, or I didn't have a binge. And versus if someone sees that you've lost weight, you're getting that feedback immediately from everyone. So there's that validation piece that's different.
When we were talking about this as an idea for a episode, I had a look on my YouTube channel because I know a couple of years ago, one of my earlier videos, I did a video called Small Wins in My Binge Eating Recovery. It was interesting because I watched it back going, what were these? Because I couldn't remember what small wins I said. So I'll tell you what some of them were. So one of them was, and it is a story I've shared on the podcast before, it was that time when I went out for breakfast and I'd had a hot, filling breakfast meal and I felt full. And I had a moment of feeling appreciative about feeling full, a moment of thinking, actually, this feels nice.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd felt like that for years. And it was so unusual and out of the ordinary. That's why I remember it all these years later. That for me was a small win to be able to feel full and enjoy that feeling of fullness. I mean, anybody else would be like, so, right? Good for you. You had breakfast and you felt good. But for me, it was kind of a
Yeah, I
big.
think everyone listening here would understand. They know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it is that. To me, I feel like this is an area where I feel very, very connected to my own self validation being enough. I was speaking to somebody yesterday or today about this. And by the way, this still goes on. So, yesterday, I've been in recovery for 4.5 years. Yesterday, I had a moment. Oh, as I was speaking before we went live about how I've been really worked up over the past 24 hours or so about my daughter who had an assignment in her middle school to count calories. You can imagine, right? So I wrote a letter, I've been posting about this, and I've been getting a tons of feedback. And so it's been exacerbating my energy, right? Like I've been like, whoa. So my system's been up. And during the time that it was so high, I actually felt like I lost my appetite, which is not typical for me. But when I've got very high activation, it almost goes away. So yesterday I noticed like that in the morning, I was just like, yeah, adrenaline all morning. And then as the afternoon kind of came on, that adrenaline started to go down and the hunger came in. It's like, gosh, I really haven't even eaten. I had breakfast, but I just hadn't eaten as much as I normally do. And so all of a sudden the hunger came up really pretty. I was like, oh, I'm hungry. And there's this moment I had, and I can see like looking out my kitchen window, this happening. I was like, oh, I could I could just go in my kitchen. And in a prior life, it would have been like food, regulate, food, regulate, food, regulate. I had this awareness of what was happening. I was like, okay. And I ate something as I was making something because I knew that my body did need something right then. And I was like, oh, yep, that's what's going on. But I was like, I want to plate something. I want to have something substantial and real. And I could, like, that was available to me. Whereas normally, I still say normally as if before it would have been very urgent and very primal, and I wouldn't have been able to stop that. And even in that, I was like, this, like, just being able to do that is still cool for me. And it's something I don't take for granted. And that kind of moment, nobody knew about it except for you do now, but I didn't know that at the time. And, nobody would see it. Nobody else in my life would even think that was a big deal because it's what they've always done. But to me, I was like, that's something that was not always available to me. And I'm grateful. And that kind of inner knowing to me is like a win, is like celebrating a little bit. Just me stopping long enough to be like, hey, you, look at you go. Like that still happens to me quite a bit. Yeah, you've come a long way.
Well, it's the recognition of progress, the recognition of change that is hard to see when we don't have that concrete black and white measurement. Before we recorded, I was thinking about this as well. And something that popped into my head is maybe 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine bought me, on my request, I specifically asked for it, 6 mince pies from Ollie and Steen. Now, Ollie and Steen, I don't know if you remember who they are. They're the cinnamon slice guys. You know my cinnamon slices?
I know that. Yeah, I wouldn't know. Yep.
Each year they do these incredible mince pies that have crumble on top. So they are very different. I mean, you guys don't even have mince pies, but I'm guessing do you know what it is now? Have you heard?
Can you just, in my mind, I want to say is it ground up meat?
No.
Oh, good. I don't know why that's what I thought it was. And I was like, oh, like mincemeat. That's why I was thinking that.
Well,
Thank
the stuff
goodness,
in it, we call the stuff in it mincemeat.
Oh, but it isn't.
So even when you buy it in a jar, it's called mincemeat. It's not, it's dried fruit. There is a British person listening live now who can fill this in. I don't know if it's because it used to be meat and something sweet and then the meat got phased out or something like that. Okay. So the mince does stand for mincemeat, but when you buy mincemeat in a jar, if you're going to make it at home, it's still this jar of fruit.
That makes me that makes so much more sense to me because you guys all eat it. And I'm like, I don't want that. I don't know. You must have to be British to want that. But now I understand. We have cookies like that. There's a cookie that my mom makes that's like that.
Okay. Do you have Christmas cake as well?
What would that be? We don't call it that. Panettone kind of thing.
I have some. This is not great for the podcast, but I'm just gonna go and get it and show it to you.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's gonna be a panettone. What I would call that. No. Oh, okay.
We're not European ever since Brexit, remember? So this is fruitcake. Can you see? So it's just dried fruit. It's very dense and it also lasts forever because it's soaked in something. And then it has a very thin layer of marzipan and icing on the top.
Not my speed. Why did we bring it up?
I don't know how we got here. Oh, because I was talking about my win with the mince pies.
Okay. Go. We get off track a little.
Oh, Moira's saying mincemeat and mince pies from Spices and Suet. Do you know what Suet is?
This is Wait, Chris says mincemeat comes from 15th century when mincemeat had meat in it. Yeah. So okay. That makes sense. I wonder when it changed over and why.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, Chris, if you could find out when it changed over and let us know. Do our research for us. Thanks. Anyway,
what happened to you in your mincemeat pie?
Because they're made fresh in the bakery, they only last a day. So I had to put them in the freezer and I was taking them out when I had them. And normally if I had 6 of those, they would be gone. And for me, I've got 1 left. And there is such a part of me that is going, I want maximum enjoyment from that mince pie. I want to have it in a moment where I'm going to enjoy it the maximum amount. And to be able to say to myself, not now, because I want to really enjoy it when I have it, is mind blowing to me. Because previously, I couldn't have done that for years. For years, I couldn't have done that. Because one, it would have bothered me the fact that it was there. And two, I couldn't have done it.
I couldn't. I just couldn't. I think too, there's a difference between doing it from a behavioral perspective versus doing it from a sincerely, I just don't need to perspective, right? Because there is a temptation to be like, oh, well, I white knuckled it, you know, but it's not that. I think the real win is like, I didn't feel the desire. I didn't have to fight it.
We'll just do this mincemeat update. We're going to have to cut some of this out of the recording.
But you think people don't want to know?
Well, you never know. So Chris has continued, meat was preserved with sugar and alcohol. So that's why it was sweet. And then Moira's added 15th century meat. Then 18th century was tongue or tripe. And 19th century minced beef dropped the meat in the 20th century. There's
a little history for you.
I
know that will educate the American listeners because I didn't know any of it. I thought you guys were eating meat pies, like meat pies.
So that episode of Friends when Rachel makes a British trifle, it's like, that's probably not too far off, to be fair. All the British people watching it are going, yeah, and?
Well, at Easter time, we have in the Italian tradition, we do a meat pie. It is a meat pie, but it's not sweet in any way. It's got a crust and everything, but it's all savory.
Yeah.
And it's lovely. It's too much, actually. A bite is good.
So I'm curious about that recovery period where you are going from right in it to things are starting to change. So for you, I'm guessing that was when you read The Effort Diet, right?
No, nothing had changed then. It was it was after that birthday I had where I was like, right, I'm going to actually put this stuff into practice. Okay. And then it was about six months later that I started, 3 to 6 months, there were things that started to shift.
So for anyone who's new to the podcast, Steph went for the all-in approach, had to get rid of all the rules because you had so many rules, had to get rid of all of those, allow complete food freedom. And then it was 3 to 6 months before you started to feel more regulated with your eating. But during that 3 to 6 months, were there any moments where you're like, oh, okay, well, this is a bit different, or that I could call this a bit of a win that comes to mind?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, this one was a bit later, but I remember the first time that I would always be someone who would finish every single thing on my plate, no matter what. Like that was just not a thing I didn't do. And the first time that I recognized that I was kind of satisfied or done and my plate wasn't empty. Now I did finish it anyway, but I recognized that there was like, I was like, I could be done right now. My psychology, I don't think was safe enough to stop. So on the outside, everything looked the same, but inside there was this like, wow, I could be done without having finished everything. And also I have really had a hard time at dinners. Like I never would have a plate of dinner and feel like, okay, what's next? It was always like, how could I go secure that second one? I need to have more. And I always wanted many, many portions of dinner. And so I would usually get that by way of cleaning up, you know? So I felt like, okay, everyone go. And as I clean up, I basically have more like plates, you know, the equivalent of other plates of dinner. And when I started to be like, oh my gosh, this is what people feel like when they have dinner and then it's just dinner. Like it's just like this plate of food they eat and then they go on. Like instead of getting stuck there and like I can't get out, that stuff started to happen to me where and also waking up in the morning and not having food be on my mind first. Like that was how I would wake up and go to bed. It was just like food. Okay, what did we eat yesterday? Like that was just that's it. And to wake up and be like, oh, just to like stretch and yawn first, or not even for like, food would be like, oh yeah. Once I got downstairs, I was like, oh, this is the first time I've thought about food since waking up. That stuff was exciting. You know what I mean? To me, I was like, what? It's like, this is what normal people do. I think this is what it's like for them. How is this even possible for me? I wasn't even trying. It was just happening to me. And it was like, that stuff was I think that stuff happened all the time. in that. I would say, yeah, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, that stuff started to happen a lot. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable to me.
Mm-hmm. So some of these examples that we've shared so far are quite concrete behavioral examples, if you like.
Mm.
And my mind is now going to those shifts in how we feel about certain things and how important that they are as a way of understanding progress. So I would say that my shame levels around my binging reduced before my binging reduced. So there was that compassion piece. There was the whole looking after myself after I'd binged. I started to see myself as confused as opposed to undisciplined, weak, can't stick at anything.
Yeah.
And just it's only a little example. It's not a particularly brilliant one, but it's just very recent. So this week I decided to go back into therapy. And so I was a bit nervous before my therapy session because it was with a new person. And I'd had a couple of clients and my therapy was at 1. And so my client had finished and I only had 10 minutes between my client and therapy. And of course, it's lunchtime as well. So I think there was an element of being ready to eat. But I could also tell there was this tension in me about the session ahead, and had a box of celebrations. You know what celebrations are? Did you see my latest reel where I'm having food shoved on me?
Yes.
That last
yes.
box, that was the celebrations. It's a box of chocolates. And yes, only the rubbish ones are left.
Oh, okay.
And all
I thought it was Halloween candy.
No. All the Brits know what the rubbish oons are. Milky Way.
The ones with like jellies inside and creams.
Oh no, it's not like that. You would recognize these. You have Twixes. You have Twixes, don't you? And little mini
They're
Mars
just
bars.
repurposing their Halloween candy, you know. Is this at Christmas time or anytime?
I think you can get it anytime, but at Christmas they're often on offer and they are, everywhere in the store. But the ones that are usually left, I would say, as the Milky Way. I always thought it was the Milky Way and the galaxies, and someone else said no, it's the Bounties and the Mars bars.
I love Bounty.
But my favorite goes Twix, Snickers, Maltesers, and then the rest. Have you ever had Maltesers Easter bunnies or Maltesers reindeers?
I thought they were Whoppers.
What?
I thought a Malteser was the same as a Whopper. Do you have Whoppers?
Burgers? Like Burger King Whoppers?
No, those crunchy. It's a malted milk ball. That's what it is.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. I keep getting distracted on my stories by wanting to show you stuff.
What are you trying to show me now?
Well, the celebrations. I still haven't told you what the win was yet.
Oh, right.
So we were talking about.
What is it with us this lately? You guys, we recorded an episode last week that's a doozy. Just wait for it.
Oh man. So I wanted to mention this particular example because it wasn't new behavior. So in that 10 minutes when I'm feeling this tension and there's this box of celebrations there, I grab like a celebration and I shove it in my mouth, and I grab another one and another one. And I had 4, which is not a lot by like any kind of binge or compulsive eating thing. I mean, I couldn't have even this is a win. Even being able to have a box of celebrations in the house is a win. As I was doing it, there was a little bit of me that kind of went, like, Sarah, this is compulsive old behavior here. And then when I went into my therapy session, I told her, just as a matter of fact, about having 4 celebrations. The thing was actually that I thought about afterwards is that it was so easy to just say it.
Yeah.
Previously, 1, I would have panicked. 2, there's no way I'd be telling someone I've just met, hey, guess what I just did?
Really? Not even a therapist?
Not from the off, no. And the other thing I noticed as well when I was talking to the therapist, just as I was sharing some things, I really noticed how this is in the last 18 months, how much more self-compassionate I am when I'm struggling. I used to get so, and I say used to, like it's something I've completely moved past. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there will be times when I will and have been so frustrated with myself.
Yeah.
That kind of annoyance and frustration. It's like there's this kind of voice in my head that previously I had to really work to find, and now sometimes just comes in. And that, for me, I think is huge. And this is sort of, I say post-recovery. Are you ever really post-recovery? But this is something much more recent that is completely immeasurable.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even really noticed it until I was talking to the therapist, telling them a bit about my year and previous couple of years. It was really live to me then. So there's something as well. And we're talking about progress, about sharing progress with other people. You know how you said, 10 For you, it's getting to a place where it's enough to validate it yourself. And yes, we need to be able to do that too, but also being able to share it with people if there are people that you can share it with that understand, like people that you might connect with online who are in this same space.
Yeah.
You look like you're about to play devil's advocate. Go on.
No, I was just trying to understand. The sharing it part does what? What are you saying about that?
Yeah, when somebody hears you, sometimes you hear yourself.
Well, I think it's the power of witness. Do you mean that?
Yes.
Yes. And to that point, in response to this question originally, I thought about how I celebrated my wins. And I don't think a small part of it had to do with sharing here and starting an Instagram. Like in the beginning, it wasn't an account for coaching. It was just like thoughts and just putting things out there. There's I didn't know anybody who's following me. It was just, and there were like 20 followers. It was just, but the fact that it was out there somewhere and somebody could see it was very helpful to me, which I think is the equivalent of perhaps sharing in a group, which I wasn't a part of at the time. There is something about being witnessed that I think is part of the celebration. Yes, I agree.
And as well, sometimes doing those things that feel horrible, but that you actually do. I'm thinking one of the wins that comes up quite a bit actually in groups and stuff that I've done is when people have got rid of old clothes that don't fit them, for example. There can be such a power in releasing that and making the choice to release these clothes that you've held on to it for ages. And that is huge for a lot of people and painful for a lot of people and may not feel like progress, but I think it can be a huge shift sometimes.
Well, it's like when you get to the other side of a fear, it feels like it's a visceral feeling to me. It's like a shedding. It's like you can breathe. I think this has to do with this. I don't relate to it, so I'm curious about it. That I never had shame about sharing that. But I could imagine that if I felt ashamed of that it would feel amazing to not feel that, like to be like, that feels so authentic. I think that's a whole window into another way of existing with yourself. I do relate to shame, but not in the context necessarily of sharing it.
Oh, well, I'm noticing an interesting potential difference here. I always felt shame about not liking myself, whereas you've always talked about being quite open about not liking yourself. For me, not liking myself felt more shameful than, I want to say, than my perceived flaws. And I don't even know quite what I mean by that, but there was something in that. It felt like, do you know the words that are coming into my head? And I haven't really quite made sense of it. It felt like I lose, like I've lost life. If I haven't managed to even like myself, I've lost.
I think people will relate to you.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that there's like two kinds of people in the world. I'm not that kind, but like I know they're out there.
Yeah, well, I think it's that whole existing in the projection of others. So if others think I'm okay, they believe I'm doing okay, then maybe that's true. Maybe I can convince myself that that's true.
Oh, okay, so you use it as leverage. To me, it feels like if I'm not being honest about my experience, it feels like I'm farther away from where I'm trying to go. Like it's an act. It takes a lot of energy to pretend. And to me, that's like, I'm getting farther away from myself.
But it's a pretending to self as well. Kind of going back to the self-deception thing.
Oh, okay.
It's a pretending to myself. It's not as conscious as I don't like myself, but I'm going to make out that I do. Or I really think this and I'm going to act like this. I'm acting like that to myself, even on my own.
Yeah, but
are you not admitting it? So it's just a feeling. It's experienced as a feeling rather than a thought. So it's a feeling of shame, but the thoughts don't catch up because it's not allowing myself to acknowledge that that's what I'm feeling. Comprende?
Yeah.
Helen was saying about agreeing with the gratitude and self-allyship is wonderful when you can notice those moments. But having a community like this that understands, can witness, and maybe even point out small wins is sublime. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Oh,
that's true. This idea. I love when somebody else points something out that you didn't know you needed to hear. You know what I mean? You're like, yeah, thank you for seeing that. I didn't. I think that is the benefit of community or just having someone else out there to, I mean, it doesn't have to be, I mean, Mike used to do that for me. He would say like, but I remember when you Like he was like 6 months ago, you couldn't ABC and now you're like ABCing without thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Mm.
Like that's great. I think it's like that checking in too. It's like we don't necessarily check in because to Natalie's original point, we're lots of times focused on what's left to do, what we
Mhm.
haven't done yet, what's not working. You know what I mean? And that seems like that's the focus instead of pausing long enough to say, wait a minute, what is working? What are those things? And that's valid all by itself.
There's also a lot of talk out there about recovery not being linear. So much so that's almost a cliche now, but cliches become cliches for a reason, right?
Yeah.
That there can be times when you might feel like you've been making a lot of progress because you've been having some different experiences, you've been feeling differently, and all it can take is just a really bad day, week, falling into a, to use your term, Steph, meta binge, then you can feel like you are back at square one and that the progress was, in my mind, when I've been there, it's felt like any progress I thought I've made, I was kidding myself.
Mm.
And so I guess in those moments of doubt, whereas compared to if you were dieting and losing weight and you had a bad, I'm using bad as in the way that they, someone might, if they were in it, not me using it, bad week or something like that, you could cling on to, yes, but I've still lost X amount of
Yeah,
pounds and I'm still here. Like there would be something
that's
concrete to
true.
cling on to that you feel like you don't have when the progress is much more emotional and behavioral, but our behavior is still fluctuating.
That's a great point. Although I will say that always felt tentative too. Like if I had lost weight, which I would do, like when I would go into fasting or keto or low carb, like I would start a new endeavor and I would be successful in the beginning for like 3 weeks or something, if that. And I would have like, oh, my clothes are loose or whatever, whatever. And then I would start to binge. And that would be that point where I was like, uh-oh, but but I still put the jeans on and they're still looser. But it felt so, there's something even deeper that you're like, yeah, but this is precarious. This isn't, I don't know that you're going to own this that much longer. It doesn't feel like stability. To me, I think when you're speaking of regulation too, that sense of being regulated is a win in of itself. Oh, this is a good example. I was in the shower yesterday and I was thinking this to myself. I was thinking my body image is better generally in a bigger body than it was when I was in a smaller body because the way that I feel in my body is so much more stable now than it was before. So there's something of how regulation feels that to me is the win. It's like the sense of something not being precarious, the sense of like, I don't feel like I have to worry about, can I say this stuff on
Of
like,
course you can. It's
yeah,
your
I got my
podcast.
period this week. And on Sunday, it was like 2 or 3 days prior. And I was like hungry for 3 breakfasts. I was like, I am so hungry. And I checked in at like breakfast 3. So I was like, what's going on? But I knew, I was like, I'm not worried. This is hunger that I know and I know how to respond to it. And I'm not, this isn't like a this isn't meta eating. This is just, it's okay. I get it. And even that feeling of like, despite the fact that I'm eating more than I normally would, and to some extent that it feels like I don't have a choice about it, like it's very much like, oh, I can't even, it's like, yeah, but it's still under some kind of umbrella of I got this. Like it's fine. I'm not worried about this. And that is a freedom. Like even inside of a moment like that, to me, that's part of the winning as well. Of not always being afraid, not always being afraid of the diet failing soon or my weight catching up with me because I'm going to start binging again. That's just not there as well. So I think there's just like feeling part that is very individual to consider. And there's a part of that that's self-trust, the feeling like we can trust this process and ourselves inside of it and what we're doing, which is very internal. It doesn't depend on someone else telling us we're doing a good job. It's like, do I feel stable? Do I feel that inside? And that's only something I would know.
I want to highlight something really important in what you're saying. I think, and certainly for me, I thought recovery would be feeling so free around food that everything I ate would feel like my choice and everything would just be because I needed it and it felt right and all of this. And when you were describing that, and that there was a sense of when you were eating that I need to do this, this doesn't feel like a choice, that is something that happens when you are a human being with an appetite.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Exactly.
And being able to navigate that is a big part
Yeah.
of recovery as well.
Yeah. It's like putting everything in perspective. It's a zoom out in a way of like, this is not, I don't need to pathologize myself. That's what I would have done 100% 5 years ago. I would have been like, look at me. This is going to be a binge day. I would have written it off by breakfast too. I would have been like, never mind, forget this day. And that's just not happening.
And that's what would have derailed me every time, though. It would be that I would feel like I'd got into a bit of a sense of balance and kind of felt a bit regulated. And all it would take was a day or a moment when I felt dysregulated.
Yeah.
And I would tense up against that. And I would be resisting my appetite. And that's where it would all start to go wrong. Natalie has commented, grief also has come up for me around how silent the wins are or misunderstood. Community is also great. I think my grief has more to do with the people in my life that aren't able to get it or recognize it.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you've got family that raise weight loss, like they're proud of you when you lose weight. They approve of the fact that you've lost weight. That when you're trying to take a different path and you're trying to self-validate when those around you aren't even able to recognize that, what's happening.
I want to speak to that, unless you do.
No, you
Sorry,
go.
I interrupted you.
No, go.
I feel really strongly about this one. This is that fear self-compassion piece, which has really helped me. So I am someone who, if somebody else thought that I wasn't winning at something or that I wasn't doing a good job, i.e. gaining weight instead of losing it in the name of recovery, that even if I myself knew that that was like, I could defend myself inside, but this discomfort with you don't see me would have really pulled me down into this place. And that can still tend to, like, I feel that still, that invitation. But this is what I do with it. I get kind of indignant about it. And I think this is part of the anger that I feel. I think this helps because I'm like, I'm not going to be pulled down by this. You might not understand. And there is some feeling about being misunderstood that I am uncomfortable with. But I'm going to embody the confidence I feel in what I have done for myself. I'm going to project that even more outward. And it's this way that I'm able to, by training, like I think this isn't intuitive to me, but I have learned to carry myself. And this is how my recovery shows up. It shows up in my refusal to wilt. That's what I would have done before. And that's where you're going to see the difference. Because when I think about my family, like when I would gain weight, I fully went along with this idea that that meant I failed and I wouldn't get dressed. I wouldn't like come out of my room, or I would just not show up. I would be very, very like, I'm here, but I'm not here. And now I'm like, yeah, I've gained weight. You might have a judgment about that. I'm going to get dressed and I'm going to be in having conversations, and I'm going to speak with my voice up here. I'm not going to hide in the other room on the couch under a blanket. I'm going to be very present. And that, I think that is how recovery can show up in your energy, kind of like not just how you look, but like how you are with yourself. That has changed so dramatically. And I think that's seeable. Maybe it's just me making myself feel better, but there's this part of me that's like, that's how they know. Maybe they don't know why I'm different or what it is about recovery that they're picking up on that is admirable, but I'm pretty sure it's that. You know, haven't you ever been around somebody who just, you can't quite put your finger on it, but there's some kind of confidence coming from them that it's like you just kind of can't take your eyes off of. And I don't mean it from like an attention point of view. I mean it from there is something different about that person. And I think that inside of this, like there's an opportunity here to look at the abstract things we talk about in recovery, like the opposite of self-abandonment and self-compassion and even confidence and self-esteem or self-allyship. That stuff can come through. I think that can be seen in this kind of energy or felt. It can be felt. And I'm very mindful of that. I'm like, no, you're going to feel my recovery, even if you can't see it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, I enjoyed that, Steph. Forgot we were doing a podcast. I was enjoying that. I also just wanted to mention Anne's comment. I don't think anything about what I'm doing around recovery would be apparent to others unless it involved weight loss. I have a good front. Also, I think that so often aren't we all just walking around in our own head focused on ourselves? So unless there's something really visual that's like, bam, something's different, someone's shaved their head, someone's weight's changed, like whatever it might be, that's the thing that's going to grab attention. But I also think that when somebody is genuinely grounded in themselves and you are interacting with them, particularly on a one-on-one basis where you're having a connected conversation, I think we feel it.
Yeah.
Like we feel it. And when you're saying you have a good front, I can relate to that because I think I'm someone that has certainly been there before where I can do the good front thing. But there is a difference, and that's hard to articulate, but it shows up in how I connect in conversations when I'm feeling more grounded in myself compared to when I am putting on an external display of confidence for something.
There's a difference between recovering on the outside versus recovering on the inside. And I think like self-esteem, and like all the themes we talk about, you can go through the motion of recovery without addressing those things. And I wonder, like for me, recovery was a way of accessing all of these concepts that needed to be addressed.
Natalie's comment, I think recovering into a fat body for me, which I'm fine with, is where I feel the pain of lack of external validation, celebration of recovery, because this body isn't seen as a success or is seen as a non-achievement. I feel like we are bombarded with these sort of worldly ideas of success and what it means to be a successful human being and have a successful life. And ultimately, would you rather be rich and thin, rattling around on your own in a big house with no connected, meaningful relationships? Or not have so much money, be in a bigger body and have the connection and the relationships? And as I'm saying this, I'm conscious that not everybody feels like they have the connection or the relationships, but I feel like there's something about when all your energy goes into striving for the body and the achievements, there is a cost in being more connected with other people, more connected with yourself. So we lose the very thing sometimes that we're hoping that that's going to get. It's just kind of like a bigger existential meaning and values perspective. I mean, this is how I see it. I don't want to speak on behalf of, this is what happens for everybody.
I think the questions that are coming up at this are like this grief of the body, right? And the lack of external validation. And it's not even lack of external validation. I think it's even like it's almost like frowned upon. So it's even worse than not having validation. It's like the opposite of validation, that there's grief in that. And I don't want to suggest that recovery means like it overrides any of that. Like you can have both. There's a way of celebrating your wins and really understanding them and feeling connected to that. And that doesn't mean that you don't also feel an emptiness or fear. That stuff is still also there and can also be there even as you celebrate your wins or even as you do recognize your successes.
Feeling a bit depressed now. How do we lift it up?
Well, we don't have to. Well, now to say I'll take fat all day, every day. I think I mean also what society thinks recovery from an eating disorder means or looks like. Yeah. I think it's that like being misunderstood thing that's so uncomfortable. I feel that at times. That'll come in. And that's there. And it's kind of like, like I don't need to make that different. I don't need to find a way out of that at the moment. That stuff does come up and there is some feeling of or sadness or whatever it is about that. And that can be there. And I can also feel a lot of like gratitude for the other things that I've got. There is no perfect place.
I feel as well like, and I'd be interested particularly in your thoughts and your experience on this, Steph, but getting to the point where the cost of pursuing society's ideal is too high, the cost compared to the reward. Because when you started your all-in recovery, you were in a smaller body, right? So you had kind of got to, I mean, I know it would never have felt like you'd got there. I appreciate that.
No,
but
and it wasn't a small body either. It was like but it was smaller than I'm in now. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's would somebody have described you as slim? Do you think?
Like that fit slim, like not slim. I was never, I mean, I was, but like, that sort of fit aesthetic.
Yeah. Okay. So you had the fit aesthetic then. And it was from that place that you went into all-in recovery. And I'm guessing because the cost of trying to maintain that was too high. Like what? Otherwise, why?
Correct. It was look, the societal implications of that body was not hard at all. I loved that. It was the cost was too high for me inside. There was a swap that I made. There was like this trade I made of like, I want to take the internal okayness and I'll swap out the external one. That's essentially what was the exchange I made.
Yeah. I think you need to make a post on that.
Why?
I think it was a really good concept. Sorry.
Oh,
it was a bit defensive. Why? I just thought it was a good concept. Even having those moments where you survive a family gathering in a different way, anytime that you show up in a different way that is in service of your recovery, that's progress, that's a win. And I guess always acknowledging that there are going to be times where you feel like you're back at square one. Probably for most people. Not everyone's recovery looks like that, but probably for most people. And I guess to normalize that. What are your takeaways, Steph?
Yeah, like also, I spoke on this in a different episode, but even if behaviors are still struggles, if we're like learning and evolving and gaining insights, to me, for me and my personal value system, to me, that's progress. Like that feels like progress to me, to just have a different way of conceptualizing all this stuff.
I'm loving Angela's comment. I don't know if you see it. I'm softer, flowy, more accepting of what is, less clenching.
Yeah, I like the angle of looking at it from like the felt sense, which I mean, we've been talking about, but it just really highlights it. That progress can feel like the access to that feeling more often, even if just a little bit more often. Natalie says, I'm thinking to write down some wins and see them in black and white, my own accumulation of wins. Yes, I think that's a good idea for people, especially like I think it's a good practice.
Yes.
To do that. It's a bit like gratitude journaling in a different way. Like the concreteness of that can be helpful too. Anne says, one of her wins is that I mentioned to a few people who I didn't know that I have had an eating disorder and body image struggles. So again, like that vulnerability and the shame piece. I've had sweet foods in my house and not eaten them all at once. I eat bread again. Yes, I like the. I also to mention, wins are not always like I can resist or I don't eat the thing. It's also being able to have the thing and that being normalized or feeling okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, we got to go.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. And I will get us out of here at some point. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
He's saying.